Tiferet is certainly the most balanced and the most beautiful of the vessels on the tree of life. That is why it's called beauty. The images of the sphere Tiferet are threefold: a majestic king, a child, and a sacrifice divine being. Now, it is not difficult to deduce that this imagery, along with some of the other characteristics of the vessel, would have aroused the interest of a certain Jewish heresy that called itself and still calls itself Christianity. Because even in the Jewish Kabbalah, without any Christian admixture, shall we say, it is frequently stated that the sphere of Tiferet is the localization, shall we say, of the Messiah. That is the messianic sphere on the tree of life. And so certainly when Kabbalah came into the hands of Christians, which incidentally was greatly facilitated by some Kabbalists, because sort of in certain historical periods around the time of the Renaissance and even somewhat before, a lot of prominent Kabbalists like Abulafia and others encouraged the Christians to study Kabbalah and brought them material and so forth. So then in the Christianized Kabbalah, this sphere always came to be associated with Christ. It is also often called the lesser countenance. The archangel associated with it is Raphael, the angel of healing, also the angel of the sun. The angels are the Melechim, known as the kings or the rulers, and the celestial attribution to Tiferet is the sun. The spiritual experience is the vision of the harmony of things, and the corresponding portion in the human body is the breast, or more particularly the heart. So with these in mind, we can then take a look at the sixes of the minor arcana, and we will see that all of them are of a fairly benign disposition. The first card, which will be our Six of Pentacles. The divinatory meaning of the card is that of material abundance and success. So obviously, when you are engaged in some enterprise where that is a crucial factor, then you would be pretty pleased by the appearance of this card. However, once again, we have to be aware of certain subtleties. Let me, for instance, indicate how very often this card manifests. It is not always a matter of winning the lottery or receiving a lot of money or things like that. I certainly have seen it appear in many cases where there wasn't much money around. But in those cases, it denotes an abundance of concern, an abundance of talk and activity about material things. So that, let's say, when one is thinking about and trying to figure out one's finances, when there is talk and negotiation and things of that going on about material things, then this card is very likely to make its appearance. As you can see, the quality of Tiferet is imprinted there with the scales. If you like to think of things in sort of geometrical and symbolic terms, you might think of Tiferet with its 6 number as being somewhat like the six-pointed star, the Star of David, or the interlaced triangles, a very balanced structure. So within that balanced structure, you would see a situation where the material situation, the material forces are balancing themselves out and coming to a good condition of that sort. Now remember that while in our culture and in our economy, money is of course regarded as the prime symbol and manifestation of materiality and of the material exchange and so forth, the suit of pentagrams does not pertain to money alone, but to anything that has a bearing on the physical level. So if you were to deal, for instance, with education, which certainly is one of the meanings of the suit of Pentacles. The acquisition of skills and things of that sort. Well, then also the project along these lines would be well aspected. If you were dealing with an artistic situation, the expression of your inner powers and insight and intuition in an external material medium, which is of course the way that all art works, again, it would mean that a good and harmonious situation would arise within that sphere of life. So whether it has to do with self-expression, whether it has to do with education, whether it has to do with the acquisition of anything, including knowledge, it all would be very well aspected. An unreservedly favorable card, one might say.
Thank you, Stefan.
Dr. Heller has already said so much about that card, but I think it's a very beautiful card, and I have meditated a bit of it here now, and I see that the colors in the card actually draws the Star of David on the Kabbalah tree. I will show it in Robert Wang's beautiful book. Can you see it there? It's drawn there.
Yes.
And if you take all the colors in the picture, you get that star. And what I think is also very interesting is the undergarment, the tunica under on the main character in this card. It's the same card. It's the same color as the flag of Israel with the Star of David. So it's coloring in the pentagram in the card unconsciously. And also I think it's interesting with the coins, because there are 3, 1, 2, and I don't know what that's meaning, because it is one Sephira that has moved if you are trying to pin it in. But if we look at it for readings, I think, as Dr. Heller already has said, and for me, it has come up many times for me personally when I ask a question about economic situation, and I think I should do an investment or should buy something, but I don't think I will do it. And then this card comes up and I see it like you will be able to do it. I see it like a sign for that. So that is what I want to say about it, I think. Yes, thank you.
I don't know, I thought I would go ahead and remind everybody that's going to speak, if you will start by saying something like, okay, so that the video switches to you, and then your presentation is nice and clean for upcoming edits that would be done to make a nice clean presentation. I had that in an email, but I thought I'd mention it here live as well. And I think, believe that I'll turn it over to Allison to host.
Thank you, Brian. Who would like to add some comments on the Six of Pentacles?
I would.
Anna.
Yes, following what Lana said last week, when we were looking, can't remember what card it, the Five of Swords, who on the card do you see yourself? So following this lead, I'm looking at this and I see somebody who is in a higher position, but whoever, how do I see myself in this card? As a beggar, or somebody who receives, or somebody who gives, or who provides? So I'm just fascinated with this idea, looking at different positions in a card, and also following Magnus, what he said about the color. I also was attracted to different colors. Also see the red on the belt is different from red on the coat and the leggings that he is wearing, as well as cuffs. So I would like to put a request to maybe somebody can talk more about the colors and what each of them represent in cards, because they have a lot of meanings, and I would like to learn more. So that's my 5 cents or 2. Okay, thank you. I'm putting myself up.
Lana, Colin, Jareel, would you like to add? Let's think about this in terms of divination as well. Jareel, go ahead.
Sorry, I unmuted and immediately had to cough. So I think one of the salient things in here that we haven't mentioned much, Dr. Heller did mention it, is the scales that we all recognize as the scales of justice. And here we have somebody who is giving literally alms to the poor, and that shows that sharing is a part of restoring justice in the world. For whatever reason, the benefactor here is very well-to-do and has a lot more than he needs, and he shares it with others as a means of restoring a bit of balance between them in the material world. I really don't have much to say about the colors. I did think that was an interesting observation, that it escaped me entirely in terms of the blue and white, and the color blue appears again, the character on the lower right, but I just don't really have any insight into the various colors. But as Dr. Heller said, all of these 6 cards are very felicitous cards, and this one in the material world, I think, stands for generosity and balance and equality.
Thank you. I might add that if this card came up, and I'll just do some divination comments, like if it came up as a summary card, if it comes up as an advice positive or as an advice negative. So as a summary card, it might, as was indicated before, give you the go-ahead in terms of having the confidence to invest or to spend money on something. It might indicate that the overall flavor of this is to, if someone's contemplating something or being requested perhaps even to borrow money or something along those lines, it would be, in terms of a recommendation, it would certainly recommend to be open-handed in your dealings. If it were in the recommend against place, then it might really question, are you trying to maybe overcompensate? Is someone, is there guilt perhaps going on, or there's some kind of, if this was recommended against, then somehow the generosity that's indicated would be less desirable. So maybe there's something there where there's just an ongoing one-way flow of finances, or something might be indicated against, if depending on the position. So and then, of course, if it were recommended in favor of, it would definitely say that maybe, even if it doesn't seem prudent, that it's necessary for you to do this just to achieve some balance, just that you, it would be productive for you to do that, or it would balance things for you to do that. Or if conversely, if you were in the position of asking and it were recommended, then you should feel okay about asking. It's not something that would be something against the flow of righteousness. So those are some things that come to mind. Who else has some things that they would like to share? Ala, is that you?
I would like to say something.
Go ahead and put your mic on, please.
Oh, I thought was my mic is on. That's Lana. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Lana, did you want to speak, or was that Allah? Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Lana.
So I see this card in two ways. You know, in the one context, I see this as someone who is, you know, doing charity work, and probably as you'll experience this time of the year, right? You know, before the end of the year, the holidays, you know, we get enormous amount of mail, people, you know, asking for donations, and so it's something is that in the philanthropic work, donations, and who is worthy of, you know, me, and also it's just something that you have to do this for others, not for yourself, because the building, you know, the castle is kind of far on the background. So here's the Lord of the castle who is coming down to the earth, you know, from his hillside to do the charity work. But the other side of this card I see is more of an internal work, and it's finding, you know, a balance in your life, and in a way that you know, we have this expression, time is money. Different parts of the personality, you know, that or different projects, but I see it more of an internal. Is it a part of me that is a spiritual, and I want to do some, you know, dedicate my time and my resources to a spiritual part of me, or the other one that is practical, and the scale is there is to balance, and this is how I see this card. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Allah, had you wanted to go ahead, Allah?
No.
No,
No,
oh, okay. I
think
saw your
no.
hand earlier today. Excuse me.
No. I was just moving my hand from unmute to mute. That's why you
Okay.
see my hand. Yeah.
Thank
No,
you.
I'm good. Thank you, Lana.
Michael, anything to add?
I just want to say it's very interesting, the position of his hands, kind of like the magician with, you know, as above, so below. You have the left hand that's holding the scale above, and the right hand that's giving the money below. So it's almost like he's been given these gifts from maybe a higher place, and then he's redistributing them with his other hand. So I find that kind of interesting. It's also interesting, you know, the scale being where, like Magnus said, one of the Sephiroth could almost be maybe a nod to that, you know, scale-like quality of the Sephiroth it would replace in that position. But yeah, those are my thoughts on it.
Thank you.
There's something more that could also be said about the particular Sephiroth here, which is in the center, and it's the only Sephiroth that every single other Sephiroth has a path into. And in that hexagram that Magnus showed us from the Robert Wang book, it also shows that with that Star of David inscribed on the Tree of Life, then Wang attributes then that six central Sephiroth there stands for the sun, and the six then known planets from classical era are noted as surrounding it. So there's a lot of astrological significance in this particular thing with regard to the tree of life, and that would permeate all of the suits, of course.
Thank you. Shall we move to our next card?
Six of Wands. And with the Six of Wands, we have a much more bright picture right away. It has to do with victory, with happy and victorious news, with one's mind, one's intuitive perception disclosing something good. So at a kind of more reductionistic level, you might find that this card very often will indicate good news coming your way. I don't know, in the mail, in the email, wherever the case may be, the check is in the mail, you know, whatever, something good is coming your way. But generally, you will discern something of a beneficial and happy and indeed victorious character. Unreservedly pleasant and good card.
Thank you. Magnus, do you want to share some observations?
Yes, thank you. Okay. This is a card that often come up for me when something is going very good, and it's a good outcome of something, and it's often come up as the result card or the first card in the cross. And looking at it more deeply, I see a lot of green in this card, and it's also L'Oreal on the guy's head, and it's also L'Oreal on the wand. So there's a symbology there also, that there is some sort of success on the personal plan and also on the higher plan, or it's coming from the higher plan, I think. And it's also a red ribbon tied around that L'Oreal, and it's the same type of ribbon that is tied on the Universal Word card, but there is this two of those ribbons. And the colors also, if looking at the six of coins also, it's mainly, many of the colors is mirrored in this card also, but it's mostly green. And I think, like Dr. Heller, it's a very lucky card. It's a very good card. Thank you.
Lana, any observations from you? Or
let's before we do, could we have Colin go ahead and click on that card to put the good doctor? No, click on the big blow up. Click on the big blow up to dismiss the good doctor, and then right click there. Thank you. And so what was that going to be, Lana? And Lana, say, okay.
Okay. So we're seeing the central figure here who is carrying the laurels, you know, and you know, he's really happy. We can't really see his face, but we can see his horse's face. The horse is happy and proud, and it looks like a very, very happy card. But there's one thing that I see there behind. You know, he's on a horse, but then there are other people that are following, and it looks like they're on their feet. And so to me, you know, there is some kind of a warning from this card. You know, this is all great, but get off your high horse. Be more, you know, humble. So that's all I have to say.
It appears to me that the scene that's being shown is there's a victory parade. You know, when when the Roman generals would prevail in a war, they would be welcomed back to Rome and given what was called then a triumph. And so this card in general, I think, represents a triumph that you've accomplished whatever it is that you went out to accomplish. And so I would see this as being the victor with the laurel on his head and on his wand, and then the spectators of the parade that he's being honored with are showing there. So this also would represent to me that of giving recognition for having made a significant achievement, probably something that's significant not only to oneself, the victor, but also the society, whatever, of which that victor is a part. So as Dr. Heller said, this is about as good a card as you could ask anywhere in your reading.
Thank you. I will add similarly that if this were coming up as a summary card, then generally speaking, it looks like the battle has been won, things are successful, it's coming to a successful close, and you can't necessarily see what's behind the horse, or there's quite a bit on the card that is not visible. So this might be an indication that the battle is won, but the war might still have more things going on it to accomplish. If this were in the positive recommendation position, then it would recommend that you do pursue, that this looks like it will bear fruit and be something that will carry you in a positive way. If this were in a negative recommendation position, then it might say, don't count your chickens yet. Don't consider yourself to be a winner. There may be something that you're not seeing. You think that you have won the battle, but other people maybe have a different idea. So you might need to look a little bit deeper or see what the basis of this victory is, because there may be something that's out of balance in that. So those are some divinatory ways to approach this card in those positions. Anybody else? Allah has pointed out in the past that the green indicates growth and positivity and potential. I want to notice those features in this card as well, that this has a lot of greenery, both as Magnus pointed out, in terms of the laurel wreaths on the main wand and on the rider's head, as well as all the wands behind. So there's a lot of vitality indicated here. And I think we'll ask for any last comments. Michael, go ahead. Thank you.
I was going to say, I really enjoyed your comment about, the battle is not won. With sixes, Tippereth, and Tippereth being ego, you may receive this good news or something good may come your way, but how do you react to it? And maybe the gentleman on the card is reacting in the best way possible by, looking forward and trying to understand what is coming next. He may have just won whatever, you may have just won whatever, but when one battle ends, another begins. It's never, it might have a little bit of peaceful time there, but there's going to be conflict coming up. So
thank you. All right, the window for commentary is closing.
Just one more thing, and it's a sea behind the horse, and it seems like it is a stormy sea. If you are looking at the blue, there are little blue color there. It looks like water, and it could be an indication of what is already said, that it isn't that calm. You are looking at it like you are a winner, but there is a storm coming or could come. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna add something that caught my eye is the wrinkles on the horse's whatever it calls. So there are quite few. The victory is there, but it came with a few wrinkles, obviously. So that's, and I also noticed 12 leaves on the 6 wands. Don't know what it means, but just noticing. Okay.
And I think any time you have something that's got this much glory and adoration to it, there should always be the admonition that you shouldn't let down your guard. You shouldn't. What's the term? Rest on your laurels, because complacency could certainly come into play and catch you unawares.
I find it fascinating how in these cards we have these kind of adages or old coined phrases like "don't get off your high horse" or "don't rest on your laurels," "don't give up your guard." All those kinds of things are illustrated so well in these cards. Oftentimes we'll find old adages that are very literally represented there. So that tickles me.
Do those kind of things come up, Allison, in the interpretation when the card is inverted and you're paying attention to that particular factor?
I would request other folks to do that. I don't have a lot of experience reading reversals. I tend to
Nor do I.
I would say that I think that any reversal would indicate that there's some kind of imbalance involved. So if you are thinking you're victorious, then you might be sadly mistaken, something along those ideas. What other indications might be there with reversals?
Well, I would like to just jump in and say that, I realized recently that one of the reasons that we don't seem to really need to do reversals is that the positions that a card can show up in will do plenty to reflect on any sort of cautionary approach that we might need to take to a card. And I very much appreciate some of the things that were said earlier about the pentacles as well. But this one, I think in divination, most of the time that I've seen this, it really has been a kind of a caution against adding up all your blessings, being a little too assured, and because there may be other trouble ahead. As Magnus pointed out, there's some choppy waters nearby, and but the sixes, of course, all have pretty much one of the more balanced, of course, being the center of the tree, a balanced view and position. But of course, everything is moving, everything moves, so nothing stays in one place for long. And especially we'll see upcoming with the swords, that is a moving from troubled waters, but troubled waters are nearby. And so that's what I've got to add.
Thank you. I think that may wrap it up for the Six of Wands. Shall we move on to our next one?
Yeah, that would be the swords, yes. And so
with the suit of swords, of course, there is always an element of sharpness and harshness. even at their best, the swords are not all that good. One always has to watch out with a weapon, as we no doubt well know. And so that is true of the Six of Swords also. The Six of Swords indicates a change, a movement from one condition toward another. And in the weight deck, which is the one that we are using here, and which, once again, I reiterate, is one of the very few decks that has a complete and meaningful picture on all 78 cards. There is a boat that is casting off seemingly from a shore, and in the boat sit some figures that have huddled, not apparently in a state of great joy or enterprise, but rather with some apprehension. And so what we are dealing with here is change, which at the time it is taking place or beginning is maybe perceived by the person as dangerous or stressful or harsh in character, but which ultimately generally ends up well. While it's taking place, not all that happy, but eventually the outcome is all right. I have seen this card arise in the case of impending divorces, particularly when it was fairly evident to everyone except the person himself or herself that they will be in the long run really a lot better off without that marriage than they have been before, and things of that description. So whenever a change is taking place, with which we are probably not terribly happy when it is happening, there is some resistance against it, there are some misgivings, some apprehensions, and so forth, then this may appear. Yet ultimately, being a 6, it still works out well. It just means that even the benign and salvific qualities of Tifereth, when they enter the suit of swords, will, while ultimately will work out for one's benefit, will not be immediately manifest, which of course is perhaps where faith in one's guidance and things of that sort come in, that even though something doesn't look all that great while it is happening, if with our intuitive perception we are able to discern a generally good outcome and objective toward which the developments are moving, then we can be assured in that condition. Faith has been defined sometimes as the intuitive perception of the ultimate destiny of things. So that while, let's say, logically we might not be able to figure out why something will be of a certain order, but if our intuition tells us that this ultimately is going to be all right, then we have to have faith in that. That's the real faith. Not the kind of belief where someone else tells us something and we believe that person, which is more along the order of something that William James called having faith in someone else's faith, which he generally applied to religious situations, of course. So with the Six of Swords, we have to have that kind of faith, because it doesn't feel that marvelous right away, but it's going ultimately to a good place.
Thank you. Magnus, would you like to lead off with any commentary?
Yes, okay. This is one of the cards I always have had difficult with, because I think it's difficult to read and it hasn't often come up for me. But when I look at it now, I see a color that isn't in the other sixes, and that is the lilac or the violet color on the little child in the boat, which seems to indicate, like Dr. Heller already has said, that there is some intuition in this card, and this is in this case a connection to the Sephira Yesod and the foundation. So there is some sort of foundation in this situation which makes it a successful result in the end, but it is also a big change. And I also looking at the water again, because there are still water on one side of the boat and there are a bit wavy water on the other side. So it seems to be some sort of limits between the boat and the water or something. It's two different feelings in some way. That is what I think I want to say. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I was noticing as well the difference in the water that's more or less behind them, and the calmer water into which they're rowing, and that goes back into the idea in this card that there is success like in all of these 6 cards, but this comes after a lot of trouble. This looks like this person, the Roman, is delivering his passengers from some sort of significant turmoil, and particularly I take this as a mother and child, and her head is really leaning forward, and so this also looks like it could very well represent some sort of a rescue, and the Golden Dawn title for this card is the Lord of Earned Success. So you've got a good outcome, but it's as a result of something that involved a lot of struggle, perhaps some suffering before that.
Well, I'll jump in here if I may. And in divination, this has always been a very favorable card, not just on a backdrop of like having a look at all the numbered swords where you see so much tumult and difficulty. This is really quite a bit more of a reassuring and something to look forward to kind of card in divinations, in my experience, that people really are heading away from difficulty. Those are choppy waters being left behind, and there's clear sailing. There's the future, as we're moving from the foreground away, we're heading into a much better place, and that has really almost always been the upshot of the divinatory meaning. It seems to me that it is really been a card of comfort to the readee time after time. That's it.
I'll go ahead and add that if this card came up in a divination as the summary card, then I think that overall one could say that things are moving, they're getting better, that it may have been difficult, but smoother sailing is coming. Again, with some more platitudes to get illustrated there. If this were in the recommendation card, then I would say do embark on this journey. It may seem difficult, but it looks like it will be helpful to those who need it, or helpful to yourself. Similar to what Ala had mentioned before, you might ask the person, which image do they see themselves connecting to? Are they the ones being ferried to a calmer place, or are they the ferryman? How do they see that? And then what might be represented by the rough waters versus the smoother waters? How might they characterize those things to kind of get an indication? If this were indicated against, if this were recommended against, then we might say that this particular endeavor might not lead you as positively as you had wanted it to. that I think it would be kind of a literal thing that this embarkation, you might be best to reconsider it or delay it, or don't count on it to take you to a rescue. It may be, it may not represent that. I want to say what it would be, but if it's indicated against, then it just might not take you to that better place that you would so desire, even though it might seem to, or you might want to do that. It might tell you to hold off on that. That's all for me. What other comments, Lana, Ala?
Sure, I'll jump in. You know, I kind of okay. So I look at this card as count your losses and move forward. You know, the way I look at them, you know, it could be refugees getting somewhere, some foreign land, you know. There are no buildings on the other side, just a landscape. So they might have to start building their home. But nevertheless, you know, the swords there is to protect them. You know, they're not pointing at them. You know, so they're moving into their safety. So they leaving the war, whatever troubles they had, they're leaving them behind. And so they're very sad. You know, they're not looking forward to this trip. You know, they know there are going to be challenges in front of them. But most important thing, you know, they are alive. And as we've looked, the water, that if we look forward, straight forward to the land, the water is calm. So they're going to be safe. No matter what, they're going to be safe. It's difficult, but safe. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
I was going to say two things of interest in the card to me. It's one of the only ones where, as I can recall right now, in the minor suits, that he's kind of holding one of the other minor suits in his hand to steer the boat. It is a rod. So kind of makes sense that the card is called the Lord of Earned Success, if it was your will that kind of forced you to move forward and forced you to go through. And then the scenery in the background is kind of gray. Even the trees themselves are gray. So that could indicate something that's, you know, this battle or this thing that you fled from may have been painting your future into maybe something that's maybe grayer and more negative than it even should be. But those are two of the things that kind of popped out kind of when re-examining this card.
Yeah, that grayness could be an indicator of a degree of uncertainty.
Yeah, fleeing somewhere, you know, they don't know where they're headed or, you know, what the situation will be when they arrive. It is kind of, I wanted to note this too. You know, if that's his wife or whoever the passenger, the adult passenger in there is kind of covered up. And even the horse in the 6 of wands has that horse blanket on. So it's almost like the indication of maybe a coming winter with those two pieces of symbolism.
As you mentioned that, to me, that also kind of indicates that there is protection, that there's some warmth, and there's some at least one layer between you and the elements, right? But I don't see many, there's not a lot of skin showing in these, just a couple of hands and stuff in general, but that cloakedness is an interesting feature. What other comments would people like to share? Also thinking in terms of divination, how would you interpret this card? Okay, feels like it's time to close the window on the swords and move to our cups then.
Going to the suit of cups, we find a keynote of innocent joy. The Six of Cups shows children of playing in a field with some cups about, and the whole image is that of a joyous and guileless and innocent kind of an activity. So what we are dealing with here is uncomplicated, childlike and innocent joy. So I don't know if you are looking forward to a joy by taking revenge on your enemy, or some kind of rather more complex and maybe more shady kind of joy that would not be embodied in this card, but it is all very, 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 very primal, very childlike, and often actually having to do with ideas and reminiscences from one's childhood and from one's childlike nature surfacing and bringing about with it generally joyous and good feelings. One cannot expect, let's say, big transformations from this card. It's not a very dramatic card, but it is a card that indicates a very pleasant and joyous and kindly psychological condition, which no doubt we do not experience very often in life, and for that reason it is rather important and rather precious. Not as often actual children, however, but rather the childlike components and the childlike memories within oneself.
Thank you. Magnus, would you like to add?
Okay, thank you. I think this is an interesting card. It hasn't come up so often for me in readings. I also think it's an unusual art because it looks like it is out of a children's book. And the person giving the flowers is looking like a gnome. There is also a coat of arms on the little plinth or something there on the stairs, and there is also some sort of a person in the left corner in the middle of the card, and there are also buildings. But I think, like Dr. Heller already has said, it's a static card. It's good, but it won't change, and it won't be any better. It won't be any worse. It will probably be a new situation later on. That is what I want to say. Thank you.
Lana or Jeriel, Brian, Michael, Alla, anybody?
Okay, so I haven't experienced this card that much, but what kind of draws me into this is ability, to receive gifts and how we receive gifts, And so as a child, you're always happy, no matter, what gifts you receive. And especially, getting an attention from older, could be a sibling or a friend, or she's kind of surprised. And I think as we get older, we kind of lose this ability, this innocence. So I would say that I'm not sure even how to interpret this in the reading. I guess I would say maybe preserve your innocence. That's all.
Yeah, I think the children are very suggestive of innocence, and this card is called the Lord of Pleasure, and so this represents a kind of a peaceful time, and thinking again, and I'd really like to thank you, Allison, for pointing out this idea of whenever there's multiple figures in the card, thinking about which one of those figures you're looking at, and looking at the apparently a gentleman walking up steps away from this, kind of suggestive to me of a nostalgia for a past that seems maybe even more pleasant than it might have actually been at the time. And then I think that the fact that each one of the cups has a white flower growing out of it, which would be suggestive that there's favorable growth to come as well. But there's a real childlike idealism in the foreground, and then there's that little pushback of seeing the retreating figure in the center background there on the left.
Thank you. I would add, in terms of divination, that if this were in the summary place, well, a couple things. Before we go to the divination, I've used the speaking of the platitudes again, stop and smell the roses. That's another one that came to mind. But this is one that doesn't have the roses. I just noticed today, oftentimes we have the lilies and the roses. And that's like the lilies are purity and the roses is passion. And so in this case, all we're seeing is the lilies. And so maybe that's emphasizing again the childlike quality that we're dealing with, emotions that are much more childish or childlike, not engaging the mature adult passions, but staying in this kind of garden of innocence and pleasure. And so that's a positive as well as potentially a challenge. And so if this were the summary of the whole reading, then it could represent that it's a pleasant situation, but it may be not being engaged with a full being. You may be seeing it from an immature viewpoint, or you may be not taking on an adult role. You might just be kind of sliding by in this situation, potentially, or just enjoying it because it's a pleasure, and and maybe it just casts an overall kind of light tone to the reading. That's another possibility with this. In the advice positive, it might tell you, look, you don't have to be the leader and the boss of all this. You can just enjoy it and enjoy this phase for as long as it lasts. It may tell you that you don't have to take on a bossy role. Just go ahead and be taken care of. In this case, if it were recommended against, then it might indicate that you're not giving this as much of your adult energy as you might, and that your emotional take on this is one of a child. Perhaps you need to look at it with a greater sense of perspective and maturity, or more responsibility to what you can bring to the situation. So those are some things that come to mind for me.
Before I jump in here, could you repeat, and anybody else reflect on what is the symbolic meaning of the lily, because that's of course the Easter symbol. And so Allison, repeat what you said about, if you will, about and anybody else, please add to the meaning of lilies, because this is all about the lilies.
This is all of it. So this card has, in many of the cards, we see the lily and the rose, the white and the red flower together, blended somehow. But in this one, the rose is distinctly missing. And if the lilies are purity and the roses are passion, which is one attribution, then this one is emphasizing more the purity aspect of things, which corresponds with the children. They're not yet into adulthood, and so those passions aren't yet a part of their feeling. And so maybe that's something also, since this is a cups card, it could emphasize that the feeling tone of this is really a childlike brother and sistery kind of thing versus a more mature husband and wife type of dynamic. So that's another aspect of this card that we could take into account. What other what other insight do we have around the lilies, which are so present in this card?
Innocence. I think we've already said that. It's also related to spring. One of the first flowers that shows up in the spring. Young age.
Certainly within.
I would like to.
Oh, sorry, Alla, go ahead.
No, it's okay. Sorry, I would like to add something. And looking at the card and listening to all of you, maybe this card also indicates not only a surprise, but some kind of hint to a person to pay more attention to your basic self, to your younger self, and don't be so serious and expect maybe surprises that are coming. So be more, basically pay attention to your basic self, which represents the child. That's and I'm also thankful for this visual, because I never seen the guy walking out. Like Brian never saw a bridge. I never saw this guy. So this is such a great learning opportunity. Thank you.
So let me repeat my my request for any further thoughts on the meaning of the white lilies. And if there are none.
Well,
Brian,
the lilies would be associated with Easter as well. So that would bring into play all of the springtime life renewing itself after the winter, and of course for Christians that would also evoke some sense of the sacrifice of the Christ.
All right.
I also
certainly okay. Go ahead, Lana.
just also found something that I think is very interesting. So the lily being a symbol of vulnerability and freedom to be ourselves, as well as allowing others to be themselves. That's all.
Okay, I will go ahead then. The lilies, of course, are amongst the many flowering bulbs that fade away, disappear in the off season for them, like the narcissus flowers and the daffodils, and so many that emerge when they seem to be dead and gone, and then that time of year comes and they emerge and blossom so beautifully. But so it definitely, the card sort of just radiates a feeling of a renewed emotions that are pure. As we see these children in between their tantrums, they are at that moment, they are pure in heart. And in divinations, I so quite often find this to be a suggestion to try to mitigate one's own other mixed feelings, and to try to savor the moment that there really is an abundance of joy and pure, strong feeling, And of course, the innocence is really quite often what the theme is about, to try to make oneself innocent by setting aside some of the other emotions that we see throughout the cups. And so it comes up fairly often, considering, which is to me interesting, that it doesn't have an awful lot of overt divinatory meaning. It doesn't seem to really have a lot of divinatory statements to make, but of course, in the light of the whole reading, it always seems to play its role. But yeah, with the sixes, everything is as free of tumult as they can be, and people are always happy to see the card in their reading. That's for sure. I'm
Brian,
done.
let me use this as an opportunity to plug another book for you guys. This is there are lots of these copies. It's a terrific book on symbolism. I'll read you really quick the entry for Lily. An emblem of purity used in Christian and particularly medieval iconography as a symbol and attribute of the Virgin Mary. It is often depicted standing in a vase or a jar, which is in turn a symbol of the female principle. Felix de Rosnay in Le Chrisme, it's a long French title, points to the connection between the fleur-de-lis in respect to the symbolism of its form and the chrism or cross of St. Andrew intersected by the rho, R-H-O, and the ancient cross of the Andulan Gauls, a cross with a vertical line traced through the center, which is quite clearly a symbol of inversion. It was worn on the sword guard. The lily in Byzantium and among Christianized Franks was a sign of royalty. So this is a terrific little book. The author is J.E. Cirlot, or C-I-R-L-O-T. It dates back a ways, and it's been updated as well. For people like us that are interested in symbolism, it's a good thing to have on your bookshelf.
Thank you, Jeriel. Michael or Ala, Lana, Magnus, any further comments on the cups?
I was just gonna state that it is the only cups card, besides a couple that have wine spilled out of them, that has anything real growing in it or being placed in it. 7 has a lot of imaginary or things that are shown from the sky in the cups, but you know, that's interesting, especially with what Jeriel said about the lily and its importance in the cup, about that sort of like feminine ideal and that innocence.
I'll kind of circle around on that. There aren't any roses in the cup, and so if this is about your emotions, then it may be just that it's emphasizing the emotional purity, that this isn't about sexual emotions, for example. This is about something more virginal, virtuous, childlike, as opposed to other kinds of feelings that you might be doing a reading about. Like somebody I was watching a video and they were saying 9 times out of 10 it's a relationship that people are coming to the reading with. So this may be indicating against that, or the relationship is much more platonic than passionate.
There is also a pyramid in the card I have discovered on the roof of the tower. And there isn't so many pyramids on the cards. There are some cards. There are one queen, I think it is, a lot of pyramids in the desert behind. It was also interesting, Jeriel, to hear the symbol of the cross on the coat of arms there, because it was an Andreas cross, and it was connected to the lilies.
All right, well, it looks like we have worked through our sixes.